Good evening and welcome. My name is Paul Mead and I'm the Artistic Director of Gúna Nua Theatre Company. Gúna Nua is delighted to present this reading of an extract of a new play by Geoff Power, Stronger. The reading will be about 30 minutes long and will be followed by a webinar on restorative justice, which is a central theme of the play in association with the Probation Service. This webinar will be chaired by Tim Chapman, who is the chair of the board of the European Forum on Restorative Justice. And he'll be joined by a distinguished panel of experts, including Senator Ivana Bacik, Dr. Marie Keenan of UCD, Deirdre Kenny of 1M4, Ben Ryan, the Assistant Secretary General of the Department of Justice and Equality, and Geoff Power, who is the author of this play. So what you'll see now is an extract from Act 2 of Stronger. In Act 1, we have seen our central character, Jan, dealing with the aftermath of being raped and assaulted by her student, Damon. We have followed her journey through the justice system and seen her growing disenchantment with that process, even as Damon is convicted and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. Jan's marriage is under strain due to the pressures of the case, and following a disappointing meeting with her victim liaison officer, Jan returns home to her husband, Robert, and this is where we pick up the story. I hope you enjoy the reading. It's about 30 minutes long, as I said, and we'll follow with the webinar, so stay tuned. Thank you.
Scene 17, Jan and Robert's house. The couch is dishevelled. A quilt, pillow, teddy bear are all bunched up. Jan's paintings face the audience, black and white charcoal drawings. Robert returns, holding a fishing rod.
I was wondering where you were. Fishing.
Yeah.
Really? Must be ages since you've done that.
Fortnight.
Go away.
I was gone for 2 nights. Don't you remember?
Oh, yeah. Something about that old school friend, Brian.
Bill.
And you've returned empty-handed.
Caught 2 perch. Tossed them back.
Sorry, I said I'd pack these things away. I will.
And where were you?
I told you, didn't I? Paul wanted to see me.
Right. And how did it go?
It got me thinking. Yeah, it did, Robert. I'm still in this cauldron.
He leans down to pick up one of the 2 glasses on the coffee table.
Which one were you drinking from?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think this was mine.
So I'm infectious, am I?
Just a little broken. Maybe.
You think I'm disfigured?
Scars fade, Jan.
No, actually. I think you're right. Something is broken. Inside. And I can't seem to fix it. I was thinking again about the George and what he said.
Look, he hasn't ruined this poor woman's life, if that's what you mean. You're back at school full time and he's locked up, out of circulation, and that is the whole point.
Me? How does that actually help me?
In prison 7 months, Jan.
And I believe that scale.
What?
Ethos. And then the judge goes and flings terms like victim about, and Damon walks away thinking he has ruined my life.
What else can they do? What more is there?
It just feels unfinished, Rob.
Look, it's over.
What?
You just have to leave it alone. Jan, when my father died, I was hurt and I agreed. Listen, seriously.
Your dad offered you a proper end. Don't you still think of him every day? Yeah, so do I.
You do? Oh, him.
And reflection for me doesn't soften the pain.
Yeah, but does this do you any good? Do us any
I
good?
need to find out.
What? Find out what?
No, Robert! Why? To find out why!
Giving him a lift for starters, yeah?
Do you really think that?
Look, I know that's not...
Then we can't!
This is ridiculous. Shit, we really do need a holiday.
Sail away!
Yeah, well, we're teachers. It's what we signed up for. Please, look, we have to... press the resume button someday.
It's like an ugly meme on loop, this. Smothering everything. But it could evolve, you know? And I've been wondering...
No, Jan, it needs the two of us to do that, not restorative justice, if that's what
For God's sake! It's not restorative, it's restorative. Can you at least pronounce the bloody thing properly?
Yeah, RJ, whatever. Anyway, so this is... I mean, how is that taking back control if you're the one scurrying into the hole that he's buried in?
You don't understand.
Don't I? Too emotionally charged, Paul said. And that RJ would just be leaning into all that again. I can't let it happen. No, just jump into the current with me again. Instead. Please.
Every memory I have of him is bad.
You don't think of me at all, do you? Sit opposite that shithead again. No way, no, it's not happening.
All right. We'll drop it for now.
No, fuck's sake, we'll drop it for good.
He goes to the kitchen and turns on the radio. It's the Turtles, happy together.
Hey, Rob. That's our song. Turn it up. Robert. Turn it. Okay. Suppose it's nearly over.
Scene 19. Jan is in an office with Vicky.
Vicky, I'm so glad I hung on to that leaflet.
I'm sorry it's taken so long. People like to obstruct. And then, well, there was Christmas.
Paul wasn't very pleased.
Is that right?
When the penny finally dropped, it was like his wallet had gone missing. Then he sent me an email telling me there's no way a meeting will happen, and followed by 2 exclamation marks.
And yet here we are, Janice. Of course, if it does go ahead, there'll be lots of negotiating, and I have to ask...
No,
Pardon?
I'm not going to tell Robert. You shouldn't keep secrets in a marriage, I know, but some things are private.
Yeah. Men assume they know everything anyhow.
When the time's right, you'll find out. Are you married, Vicky?
Divorced. Then married. Then divorced. Still in your first?
He seems determined to stick it out.
Kids?
No. There's enough of them in school.
No, one thing the world is not short of is kids.
Robert says they'd interfere with our travel plans. And yes, they would. He decided to have a vasectomy years ago. Goodness. Now I think about it. A pregnancy test.
What do you mean after?
Yeah. Oh, God love him. We are happy. We were.
It's been difficult.
No, I've been... Have you any kids?
2. 1 from each.
Neat.
Yes, but not tidy. The only travelling I do is to my 83-year-old mum in Roundstone to drink good whiskey and hike the Airspec Trail.
Lovely.
Oh, it's precious time spent together.
Vicky, could I ask you why you haven't done rape cases before?
The aim of RJ, as you may recall, is to help clients reach a place of contentment, to create the right environment for real answers and real outcomes between offender and person offended. But if the case is brutal, with the severest of crimes, it is difficult to obtain a meaningful outcome.
I need this.
I've already contacted the prison services.
I couldn't visit him there.
It would be at a neutral venue. That's where negotiations can get bogged down. And as you probably know, he's been moved
Oh, I don't. I didn't.
to a bigger sex offender wing. Any meeting would need to take place nearby, and I'll be assessing premises.
Would they be in the room?
Who, police officers? Prison officers?
I wouldn't want them.
Well, it needs to be a relaxed atmosphere, but they'll want assurances the site is safe, that he can't escape.
He has to know that I'm the one calling for the meeting.
He does have the right to say no. We'll talk to his brother, grandmother, and his dad seems to have resurfaced.
Oh, good.
We'll present it in a positive light. But Jan, I do have to ask you why you want this. Why you'd want to put yourself...
I want him to look me in the eye, to acknowledge what he did. I want him to listen, to see me as a person who's in command of her life. I want him to
Yes,
see that I'm strong.
stronger than him.
No, just strong. And to understand why. Just why.
Okay. Right. Listen, Jan, if you feel up to it, do you think you'd be able to describe it to me, to tell me about the attack? It would help tremendously.
Grant, I can do that. Okay, well, firstly, it was just an ordinary day. He sat opposite, and I collected him. Rob didn't approve. In fact, he still thinks I only collected him the once.
Why? How many times was it?
3. No, wait. 4.
Damon has a copybook and pen. His writing is laborious and slow.
Jaguar XK or coupe. Coupe, old French word meaning four-wheeled enclosed carriage.
A shared interest in cars helped steer the class sometimes. Told me once his goal was to be an international driver, whatever the hell that is, or a mechanic. His father had been a driver, actually. And that's how he got his name. How are you on Formula 1? No, Damon Hill. His dad named him Damon Ayrton Knox. Other teachers complained he was inattentive and that he'd ask for me a lot. But we did get on well, or so I thought. He had me confused about his mother. I thought she was dead.
Hated me, man. It's dirty and mean she was.
I'd say.
And when she gave the dad a clatter, he'd just stand there and bleed well taken. And the time she knocked the shite out, sorry, that was the end of it. Needs a new one now, he does. Or else it'll just be the drink that kills him.
Vicky, I remember that day thinking he seemed different.
Was he downbeat, would you say, or belligerent?
I don't know, he talked about his Quran a lot, and the brother, of course. In fact, I remember him telling me how Zippo got his name.
Miss, he used to be little once. I swear to God, like me.
Damon, you're not little.
He still calls me shorty.
Sure, you're hardly that anymore. You're 18, a young man.
Yeah. Well, the brother, he used to carry them lighters, the old metal yokes you flick. Do you remember them, miss? Always snapping the lid he was. Then he growed up, got a few tats. So now you know when he does me bulge and the lid just flips. It's dead. Means he doesn't have to carry one anymore because he's got one permanent. The lads are dead scared of him. It's good though, because it means they look up to him and to me.
And do you look up to him?
I have to, miss. Sure, he's taller than me. It's about respect.
You don't earn respect by frightening people, Damon. Here, what are you playing at there, any?
I'm playing. Gonna draw this here coupe in a sec.
Another car. Isn't it time you had to go with something else?
Come here. Would you do me a favour? Miss, would you buy me a magazine?
No!
It'll only cost a few quid. Go on, will you? It's called Volksworld. I think you should be my teacher all the time.
Yeah, he said something like that. Attempts at charm were not always subtle. And that's when he brought up Miss Egan, or did I? Was misbehaving in her class, I think, doing God knows
But
what.
miss, only because I can't make head nor tail of what she says. I'm not messing with you. She's always banging on about Emily.
The town. Yes, because that's where she's from. Here,
Exactly.
here. Go on then. Show me that piece of paper you're hiding.
I'm not hiding. Just, waiting for the right moment. And alright, yeah, now, because you said I draw too many cards.
Jan grins when she sees his drawing of a terraced house in pencil, shadowed, with figures out front. 2 adults, 2 kids.
It's our code.
Is it meant to be your house?
Meant?
Insulted, he snatches it back.
Is that your mum and dad out front and your brother?
Fuck off, that's not me, man.
Sorry. But who? Damon, was it not you and Zippo? Can I see it again? I only got a quick glimpse. It is good. After that, he closed up like a clam. Although, later.
Miss,
Yes?
why'd you ever get married?
I do remember him saying that. Also remember him asking specific questions about my car earlier that morning. The button for the handbrake, illuminated gear stick. Thought it was all just, I don't know, childish awe. I wasn't focused, no. I wasn't trying to figure him out the way he was me.
Damon is drawing again. They hear a ping that gives Jan a jolt.
I remember so clearly what he said next.
That Miss Egan, maybe? She just asked you to lock up.
Yes, Damon, you do have ears.
No one's left upstairs.
Didn't ask that as a question. Was just saying it to goad himself on. And so that was it. The moment he attacked.
All right. Are you okay, Jan? Thank you. Okay then. Prior to any potential meeting, I'll be asking you both to consider individual requests. You may need to compromise. We'll go through all your expectations as well. Firstly, we'll talk to his family, and they'll be circumspect, like Robert is. They'll assume you want retribution. Secondly, you need to realise that there's every chance in the RJ meeting he'll just sit there with a surly face and repudiate everything. But there's a long way to go. We'll progress this slowly. I must stress, though, there will be further obstacles, and also, I need to tell you, this won't change the justice system.
Don't care about that. This is enough for me.
Scene 20. David awaits a visit. We hear prison sounds in the background. A woman to see and knocks.
Shite. Who is it? Jeez.
I'm Vicky.
Thought it might be the man.
I've come about that letter you should have received
What letter?
from the probation service.
Yeah, where I signed up to be a cunt.
Pardon? No. Have you had a chance to read it?
Bits.
Well, I thought I should come and explicate things further in person, if that helps.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Regarding a possible meeting between you and Mrs. Ogden,
That letter was full of big words and all.
like restorative justice.
See, I spoke to a few of the lads in here, yeah, and they never even heard of that before.
It's a process that considers both you and Mrs. Ogden and addresses your needs and concerns equally and individually.
Fuck me. It does all that?
It can only operate and work if both of you are fully prepared in advance, informed, and absolutely willing.
Well, you have it all wrapped up there, Missy.
Nothing happens overnight.
Or at all.
Damon, we'd carefully put arrangements in place and I'd guide you through the procedures very carefully.
Because you think I'm stupid.
Any prospective meeting would be treated with the utmost sensitivity and the entire process would allow us to get to know each other.
You'd like that?
Okay. Why the attitude?
Because you've come here looking for something.
That respects you both equally, yeah? In simple terms, talking to her could be of benefit to both of you.
I'm up to here with the fucking talk. All they have me doing in here is talk.
Did the chief officer inform you I was coming? Did he mention RJ?
RJ? Sounds deadly that way.
Well, it can be, yeah. Deadly.
He thinks I'm doing grand. God love him. I'm going to school, doing my anger management shit. So this? No.
Are you going to school full time?
4 days, yeah. Is that full time?
And you've planned to do the junior cert?
How do you know? Yeah. 2 months.
Marvellous. And Mrs. Ogden tells me you're good at art.
She say that?
You doing it in here?
The art teacher has me doing a lousy drawing for some corridor. Connects us a lot with them cunts in the main prison. She calls it the passage of fucking hope.
The passage of fucking hope. It's terrific. And speaking of hope, we do hope and believe that we can provide that.
Ugh. Believe this, believe that. It's pure bollocks. Always in my best fucking interest, isn't it? Yous lot would have me DIY myself so it's not even me looking back. And zip up.
Well, we're operating a little outside the system, Damon. And really, it would take serious courage on your part. Hardly anyone has done this before, but we think you can. The courage we're talking about is a little bit special.
How?
You'd meet a very important person.
Me now?
I'm here on Mrs. Ogden's behalf.
Mrs. O. What's your name again?
Vicky.
But, Vic, what difference can it make? It must be 2 years ago. And come to think of it, one of my teachers, yeah, the chief must have said something to him, because this teacher, now, he's alright, and he was saying that a meeting like this would just mess with me head and I would make a bollocks of me junior cert.
But it could happen after your exams. The prison escort.
Escort? Go outside?
Well, almost certainly, yes. Wouldn't that be nice?
Are you picking me head? Them escort vans are poxy yokes. And yeah, I said the lads in here think I've gone soft and all.
Soft. How? Look, why, Damon? Hold on.
Nah, sure, one of the screws will bring me down now.
Scene 21. Jan and Robert's house. Rob is on the couch. His fishing gear has been tossed untidily on the floor. He looks the worst for wear.
Think I'll be heading out shortly.
Will she? Won't she? I'm watching you.
Bit creepy.
Not easy viewing.
She spots a book-shaped package.
Missed this here. What is it?
Arrived. For you.
I can see that.
She opens it. It's an art book.
Purchased last week. 2 a.m. I was a bit hammered, so...
Federico Brandt.
Is that your man?
We're a long way from Venezuela, Robert.
The reason it wasn't cheap. Only copies were in Spanish, but yeah, we could bring it with us. See? Oh no. Oh yeah. I see a glimmer.
What do you mean?
I don't know. At least you're back painting. Although they're different, but...
Her mobile rooms.
Who's that? Well, the least you could do is thank...
Hello? No, I'm not. Seriously? Shit, he won't. All right. Yes. I think I can, yes. All right. Okay, see ya.
What's going on?
Nothing.
Don't make an idiot of me.
Right,
Jan.
okay. Yes. That was Paul.
Your man, Mr. Guard de Liaison.
Needs to see me.
I thought contact finished after the appeal.
Yeah, but it's because it's urgent.
Urgent. Good Lord. So why must never be so obvious, as Hercule would say? Has Madame forgotten her lines?
You're pissed, Robert. All right, yeah. Because there's another appeal. So there. I'm going.
Yeah, you always are these days. What, were you going to say something?
Robert exits and returns with a bottle of wine.
Ah, Barossa Shiraz. Lovely.
Oh, Robert, that's the bottle I won at the school quiz.
Look at the draw.
The fish smelt the alcohol off you, did they?
Well, you could stay home. Share it with me. No. Well, I'd have to take Mags Egan up on her offer then.
Very funny.
Time I listen to her side of the story.
What do you mean? Oh, that's horrible.
About time. About time I was horrible. You didn't even look at the book. Look at it properly. Where are you really going? Shit. Jan, sorry.
Scene 22. Damon is waiting for a visit. He's at a desk and annoyed. His portrait is of an elderly woman. It's nearly complete. Vicky appears.
Alright. It's Vic, innit?
Yes,
You asked for another visit?
I did, and thank you for granting it.
I was bored, so I thought, why not?
The last visit ended so abruptly I hadn't realised you'd made up your mind. I spoke to your father a few days after.
Yeah, since then, me nan, she...
Your nan? Have you discussed it with her as well? Can I see? Is that your nan? It's lovely. She's been a great support.
She did think your RJ was a good idea.
Is she still in favour?
No.
Oh.
She died last week.
Oh my goodness. Oh, how awful, I hadn't heard.
He shows her his drawing.
It's fucking shit. But yeah, that's her. At least how I saw her.
It's not shit, I mean, her personality, it's there.
What would you know?
In her eyes, you captured it. And she should be proud. Is she your dad's mother?
Last of the Owens. None left.
That's desperate. Dreadful. How's your dad taking it?
He's the one that told me. My nan was one of the good ones.
I'm so sorry, Damon. You've given her a kind face.
She took care of me when I was a nipper. Awful sick the last few years, but she came to court for sentencing. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't look at her. She was calling out loud and all, but I couldn't.
You poor thing. At least it was your dad who passed on the news. Some comfort there.
Till he started talking about that poxy wedding. Yeah. Floods of tears, yeah? Fucking joy, pain, the works. Place was a bleeding mess, it was. So that's that. Be a few years before I see him again. And me nan, I won't ever see her now. It's all a bit mental, all of that, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Me dad.
Oh, right. Yeah. Marriage can really change a person.
Fucking right, it can. It looks better, he does. Not the mangy dog he used to always be. Must be something good about it. I thought he'd still blame me for what happened before, like, but no.
Do you mean with your mother?
She out yet?
No. I checked, after our last visit. 1 more year.
Thanks be to Jesus. Of course, yeah, I'm bigger now. Could handle her. Yeah, but what if I hate stepmothers too?
Ah, Dave.
I read them fairy tales. Says you bring her here on a visit after the wedding, you know? Shite. What am I saying? Of course he fucking won't. My family don't keep promises.
Your nan, doesn't she? Didn't she?
Look, about this other thing. Zippo says over his dead body, no lawyers to get a sniff, no apologies, then end of.
Oh, Graham, but that's never the agenda.
What do you mean?
Well, that's not the goal of an RJ meeting.
What is the goal?
To help you both to move on with your lives.
I can't do that much in here, can I?
Well, eventually you will. And this would help.
Is she upset?
Who?
Mrs. Ogden. A screw in here I don't like. He laughed when he heard what you'd been in for last time. I don't want her out there just thinking of me as that. That's what it was. What I am in here.
This would be an opportunity.
My nan used to say that Miss was, that she was still her.
Damon, at any RJ meeting, yes, she might ask you why you were so angry that day, and also why you took her car.
I had to.
But she might ask as well about your dreams of becoming a mechanic. Restorative justice is about that too, hope. I remember she had one specific question for you, although I know her preference would be to ask you face to face.
Can you not say?
Really? All right. She would have asked what your favourite car is, whether it's still a Jaguar XKR.
Holy shit. She remember that? Okay. Tell her. Ah, no.
What?
Nah. It isn't a Jag. It's still English though, but older. Jesus, okay, I'll tell her.
Do you mean it?
RJ, you say? Would you be there, Vic?
Yes. My job is to ensure that you're both at ease. I'd also come in to see you again in advance to prepare you fully, to balance the rights and the needs of both parties. So, yes.
For me now. Doesn't matter what Zippo thinks, does it? I did something really bad. Now I have a chance to do something good.
I think, Damon, she'll be very glad to hear that.
hope you enjoyed that extract from Stronger by Geoff Power, and that it whets your appetite for a full production in 2021. I'd like to extend a sincere thanks to our actors who've done a terrific job: Karen Ardiff, Scott Graham, Mary Murray and Marcus Lamb. And now I'd like to hand you over to Tim Chapman, who will be chairing our webinar on restorative justice. So please stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for that introduction, and welcome to the webinar. I'd just like to add my appreciation of the actors' very fine performance. We've just seen, I think, a very powerful drama addressing a very serious sexual offence. I should say, if anybody has any issues about that, anything personal or any questions they want to ask or follow up on, there will be a contact address given at the very end of this webinar, so you can follow it up. In the meantime, there's going to be a question and answer session, so I'd encourage you to start putting your questions or comments on the chat box. And my colleague Darren Broomfield from the Probation Service will monitor the questions and then relay them up to me, and I will then allocate the questions to the panel. We have a very distinguished panel this evening, and I'd like to just briefly introduce them, and then I'm going to ask each one to just comment, just give us their initial observations and comments on what they've just seen. So we have Deirdre Kenny. Deirdre is the Deputy CEO of 1 in 4, a charity that professionally supports adults who've experienced childhood sexual abuse, their families, and those who've engaged in sexually harmful behaviour. 1 in 4 works in all aspects of sexual violence in an effort to break the cycle of abuse. Deirdre is also a restorative justice facilitator and trainer. Then we have Ben Ryan. Now, Ben works in the Department of Justice and Equality, where he's the head of criminal justice policy and taking a lead on restorative justice issues. And we have the writer of the play, Geoff Power. Geoff Power is a documentary producer for television and radio, but he also teaches creative writing part-time at the Midlands Prison in Portlaoise. Stronger is his second full-length play. We have Marie Keenan. Marie is an associate professor at the School of Social Policy and Social Justice at UCD, and a member of the advisory boards of the UCD Sexual Exploitation Research Project and UCD's Institute of Criminology. She's an accredited psychotherapist, restorative justice practitioner, and a registered social worker. Her publications include Restorative Responses to Sexual Violence, Legal, Social and Therapeutic Dimensions, Sexual Trauma and Abuse, Restorative and Transformative Possibilities, Child Sexual Abuse in the Catholic Church, Gender, Power and Organizational Culture. Finally, we have Ivana Bacik. Ivana is a Labour senator for Dublin University, a barrister and Reid Professor of Criminal Law, Criminology and Penology at Trinity College, Dublin. She was co-editor with Michael O'Connell of Crime and Poverty in Ireland and was editor of the Irish Criminal Law Journal from 1997 to 2003. And in 2013, she authored a report on penal reform for the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Justice. She's a feminist and a civil liberties campaigner, and has written on equality law, criminal law, and criminology. Unfortunately, Ivana, who has watched the reading, has to go and speak at the Shannon, but she will return before we're finished and will be available to answer questions. So what I'm going to do is ask each of you in turn just to give your initial observations. And if you could keep them brief, because we want to give as much time to the audience to ask their questions. So I'm going to start with you, Deirdre. So Deirdre Kenny, what are your observations of what you've just seen?
Well, thanks very much, Tim. First, congratulations to everybody involved. It's no mean feat to undertake something like this in the current climate. I think we heard a really authentic flavour of some of the elements involved in restorative justice, and certainly the journey that Jan had through the criminal justice system. When someone experiences a harm, especially emotional harm and trauma, reframing that experience can be an important part of the healing. And we know from our experience that restorative justice allows questions and answers to be addressed that isn't or can't be addressed in the criminal justice system. Shame is a very powerful emotion and is often at the core of someone's experience of sexual violence. And restorative practices, restorative justice understands shame and allows the opportunity to be addressed. The antidote to shame is empathy, and empathy allows us a space to heal and understanding the harm, which we hope then people can help to move on from. So that's, I suppose, the reading really gives some really positive possibilities for people, I hope.
Thanks very much, Deirdre. Second person would be Ben Ryan. Could you make your comments?
Thanks very much, Tim. And I'd like to echo what Deirdre said. It was great to see Geoff's words brought to life so well, and you could really buy into the characters. The thing that jumped out from me, I suppose, from that section of the reading was what it reflects what's really out there, and that there's a general lack of understanding or a misunderstanding in some quarters of what restorative justice really is and what it can bring and what situations it can be applied to. You can see Robert, the husband, has a very limited understanding of it. Also Damon as well. And people pick up bits and pieces from other people they know and they think they understand. And I've lost count of the amount of times people have told me, oh, it might work in this situation or that situation, but it definitely wouldn't work in these kind of situations. And it's something that we're very conscious of in the Department of Justice and in the criminal justice sector, that we really need to improve people's understanding of what restorative justice is. And I think the play did a very good job of reflecting that lack of understanding that's there and the need to educate people more about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, I'm going to ask Geoff, the author. What was it like to see your words come to life?
Just fantastic to be given this forum and to have such a great cast, and the involvement of so many people, both at the venue and the festival, and Gúna Nua, of course, have been tremendous. So delighted to be here. And I suppose my understanding of the system, or to a large extent anyway, the justice system has come from time I've spent inside with fellows who are in prison, and aware of some of the circumstances of what they've been through and some of the reasons, obviously, for why they're there. And I was anxious to look at the story from a different perspective. I was fortunate enough to meet a woman a few years back who'd been through this process and had engaged very successfully in restorative justice and had a very positive outcome. And so I drew on that to tell this story. And as you know, it's just it's in many ways it's so hard for both sides, and for them to come together. I suppose I always thought that if it were done well, that the ultimate the meeting that happens would be very powerful, could be very powerful theatre, and we hope to show that someday as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Geoff. Marie, you're really an international expert in this area. What was your viewpoint of the performance?
Okay, well, like everyone, I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for everyone for putting it all together. In particular, I'm delighted for you, Geoff, because I remember so many years ago when you came with the first draft of the play, and to see it coming to light, I'm just delighted for you. So a couple of things jumped out for me from the reading. First, the comment of the judge. well-intentioned. You ruined that woman's life, when he said that to the offender. And how for the Garda and how for the woman's husband, the 7-year sentence looked like a very good outcome. But how for the victim in this case, this well-intentioned, you ruined that woman's life, just kept with her, and she wasn't happy that the offender would have that power over her, that he would ruin her life. And so we know, and we also know from the reading that for her it wasn't about the sentence. And it just leads me to say about that we know that victims have very different justice interests and very different justice needs. And for some people, actually, a sentence would be the outcome they require. Validation, vindication, and so on. But for others, they need to be able to exercise voice and so on. So we can maybe drill into that more. Second thing that jumped out at me was how restorative justice and all the various persons involved, it wasn't an option. From the professionals to the woman's husband to the offender's family, this is just not an option. And so I want to just highlight the importance of the leaflet, that the victim had held on to the leaflet. And we know these leaflets are very important. We don't have them in Ireland yet, but we will, won't we, Ben, someday? But where in Belgium they have these leaflets, that once a crime is reported, that the victim and the offender get these leaflets to say we also have a restorative justice service. So that was really important, that the leaflet was there, and that victims and offenders knew about the possibilities of the service. And just the last thing, there are lots more, but the last thing, I think I just, hearing the actors read, I'm struck again by the impact of all this crime on the husbands, on the wives, on the families, on the mothers, on the brothers and the sisters. And that applies to all sexual crime, from what would appear like the most minor to the most grave. So, I've loads of stories I can tell about that, but that struck me too.
Thank you, Marie. So, Darren, have we got any questions?
Yes, Tim. The first question there is in relation to the actual writing process. So it's when the play was being written, does he find writing about big issues like sexual abuse, does it spur you on as a writer, or does it actually hinder because it's such a sensitive subject?
Okay, that's one for you, Geoff.
Yes. It's a very sensitive, and I'd supposed to be very careful with how I dealt with it. There isn't a huge amount of violence on stage, if at all. It's all implied. It's dealing with the repercussions, the aftermath, and her relationship with her husband. It's something, I suppose, that in terms of restorative justice here, it's a rare thing for anyone to engage in it for that purpose. And I was conscious of that a few years back when I met Marie, and also met with the probation service, and discussed it with them, and they were keen, I suppose, for it to proceed on that basis, that it could show the potential that it has, and even in such difficult situations as that of a rape case. So it did develop. It became a lot more than just simply a story about that. I suppose I wanted to try and, or at least with the help of Gúna Nua, we wanted to show as much of the backstory of the perpetrator as well, and try to, in some way, show his life, his family life, and his broken family life, that in particular. And but it is driven by this strong central performance and character that is Jan, and what she and how inspiring she is, and hopefully to others.
Thanks, Geoff. Any other panelists want to sort of talk a little bit about the responsibility of the writer in an issue like this? Anyone have any thoughts? Marie, you looked as if you were going to say something.
Well, I was, but then I have so many other things. I was thinking I'll hold back and
Okay.
let's move into the artistic domain. But I suppose what I will say, based on, that I was involved with the film, and the theatre company and the writer has quite a lot of power in how the characters are portrayed in these kinds of things. And I think Geoff has done a fairly good job, a very good job, very, very good job, Geoff, in this. But there is, let's remember there that authors and film directors and theatre companies have a lot of power. Lighting, how all these things when the play is actually comes to stage. So yeah, there's a lot of power that there are obligations on the writers and theatre companies and film directors and so on, how this is all portrayed.
Thanks, Marie. Darren, another question?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. With just another one there, someone was just commenting that they were struck by the ability of the facilitator to build relationships with both parties, but particularly the offender, and that they'd actually heard yourself speak about the necessity of good training in that regard previously, Tim. So could you expand on that a little bit more?
Oh, right. So this is a question for me, is it? I must say that I think training is essential to facilitate any restorative process, but I think particularly sexual harm. And I know I've spoken with Marie about this. There's a sort of basic training that you need, which is about engaging people, inviting them, preparing them for the process, and then facilitating the process to make sure that everything is done in a very respectful, safe, and fair way, so that everyone gets a chance to say what they need to say. But one of the things I've learned from Marie is I think you have to step it up for issues like sexual harm. They're so sensitive, and they're so, I mean, I think this performance showed how it really gets to you as a person, who you are, your identity, whether it's the perpetrator or the victim. And you are dealing with extra dimensions of trauma, and particularly as Marie's already mentioned, the dynamics of power and control, which anybody who facilitates in this area of harm needs to understand, just as Marie mentioned, how the system that is there supposedly to protect victims can often re-victimize victims, even when they're trying to show goodwill. I'm sure the judges, as we said, spoke from a positive point of view that this man has ruined your life, but didn't realize that how that power is transferred then to the perpetrator, that perpetrator thinks he's had that effect. So yeah, I mean, training is so important, and just the character of the facilitator is so important as well. Someone who can face people's stories, which are horrendous, and not let their own stories get in the way, or their own values or attitudes, to really listen to the rawness of the harm. Marie, do you want to add?
Yeah, I will, Tim, because I completely agree with everything you've said there. And I've written a paper on this in the International Journal of Restorative Justice, and make it available for anybody who needs it or wants it. But I've said that, for someone to facilitate restorative justice after sexual violence, they need to not only have their training in restorative justice, whether that's a large training, a few weeks or a few months or a year, or a short training. They also need to understand the impact of trauma on the person, on the victim. They need to understand the dynamics of sexual violence, because a wink, a blink, a look, a word in the wrong place, it can actually re-traumatize the victim. But also, you said all those, Tim, but also, in my view, that restorative justice facilitators in sexual violence cases need to also understand the law and due process. Because I have had experience of well-meaning, facilitators intending to do really good work in restorative justice after sexual violence, but inviting offenders to tell all when there may have been, reasons why they shouldn't have done that in the course of a restorative meeting. So these things need to be really well managed. And say in Deirdre's organisation, I mean, that was a really good example of an organisation that was steeped in an understanding of dynamics of power and control of impact of trauma and an understanding of the law. And then that organisation could do a very, reasonable training on restorative justice, but because they were embedded in it. But the other way around, it doesn't work that well. People who've done restorative justice training and don't understand the impact of all these things might need more training in the dynamic of power and so on.
Yeah. Would you like to add anything, Deirdre?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying it's very, very complex, and there are layers and layers to it. And I guess without the experience of trauma, like Marie and yourself had said, Tim, there's things that can go unseen and unsaid, and that's where the dynamic gets played out. Unfortunately, that's what we see in courtrooms all the time. There's a power dynamic, and by its very nature, it tends to re-traumatize. So the key with restorative processes is really not to recreate that dynamic and to make sure that it is a safe space. And unless you recognize the dynamic and unless you're familiar with it, it is going to get recreated. That's the nature of it. So I guess, just reinforcing what you said, it's incredibly resource intensive, it's incredibly complex, but it's hugely rewarding. And it doesn't always look like, you can't always box it up in a nice, neat bow and put say that's it, it's done. But people can really get growth from it, which I think is the most important thing.
Yeah, thank you. Unless, Ben, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, there's not much I can add to expert opinions like that, but just to say that I suppose the training is essential, but also the acknowledgement and understanding that you have to familiarise yourself so much with the individuals concerned and in a particular situation that training will get you so far, and it's absolutely essential. But without taking the time to understand the two people involved in a particular situation, all the training in the world isn't going to allow you to be alert to the kind of signals and the kind of things that could re-traumatise or could trigger something. So it's absolutely essential to be alert to that as well. Thanks.
Yeah, just before we move on, I suppose can't resist saying that particularly in these sort of cases, you can't afford to do it sort of quick and easy or cheap. And probably the biggest resource is time, everybody's time, to make sure that everybody understands the process and is well prepared. There are other cases which can be done quite quickly. There isn't a particular complexity to it. It's just two people coming to a room and sorting out a problem. But these sort of cases where there is violence and very personal indignities involved, really, people in government, I suppose I'm saying, need to understand that it does take time and some resources to get the benefits that Deirdre and Marie have shown in their work. Okay, let's move on. Darren.
Thanks, Tim. Just a couple of questions there around how easy is it for someone to access RJ in sexual offence cases in Ireland? And what is the current availability of RJ services nationally? And then I'll just group these together, the kind of when question. So when is it recommended that restorative justice, is it pre-adjudication or post-adjudication, or when does that happen? So that group of questions at the moment, Tim.
Okay, so what I would like to do is maybe ask Marie and Deirdre to comment on the current situation of accessibility to restorative justice for sort of serious cases like this. And then maybe I could invite you, Ben, to, if you can, comment on any plans that the government may or may not have to increase accessibility in the future. So, Deirdre, you're in the front line. How easy is it to access restorative justice if you're a victim or a perpetrator of a serious sexual harm?
Yeah, I think for victims, it is about accessing it through the probation service for someone who has been convicted. Organisations like 1 in 4 in the past have provided provided it in circumstances where we might be working within a family that maybe there isn't a criminal complaint. But as Marie said earlier, that's dangerous ground, and you have to be careful around, you know, our legal obligations. So, I mean, it's not a commonplace, you know, I think the request can be common, but the understanding, like Ben said earlier, is some of the difficulty. People don't always understand what's involved, and there are certainly people out there trained to provide this service, and certainly within the probation, and people like Marie and 1 in 4 are very experienced, but it's not commonplace as far as I'm aware, and it can be done, but there are definitely limitations, and it would be great to see it being opened up somewhat. Not every case is suitable, and I guess that's really, really important to keep in mind. And again, maybe it needs some legislative structure around it just to keep everybody safe.
Thank you, Deirdre. Marie?
Well, from my perspective, and based on my experience, I would say, it's not easy really to access restorative justice after sexual crime in this jurisdiction. That does not mean that the probation service doesn't offer a really good service, but for people who are, for victims of clients of the probation service. So if someone is in prison and their victim wants to do this, they can go to the probation service. Or if someone is on an order to the probation service of some form, then the victim can ask for restorative justice. But in the cases that I encounter all the time, the ballet dancer who was abused 20 years ago, whose offender spent 2 years in prison and is then out, that man has no order to the probation service, but 20 years later, she wants restorative justice. Where is she to go to get this service? The family where their father was never reported to anybody, but they want restorative justice. Where are they to go to get help with this? So I'm meeting this all the time, that victims whose offender was in prison or was never in prison, or the case didn't proceed to trial or so on, where do they go for this? And I think so the service provision within the probation service is perfectly fine for known probation clients of the probation service and their victims, but it is grossly inadequate for victims whose offender is not known to the probation service. And that's a huge gap in service provision, and that I would like to see change.
Thank you, Marie. Ben, I'll ask you to comment, and just to say welcome back, Ivana. And I'm not sure if you understand the question. The question is about the accessibility in Ireland for victims and perpetrators to restorative justice processes in cases of serious sexual harm. And maybe you might want to comment on that after Ben speaks.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I'd agree with what Deirdre and Marie have both said. I mean, any of the discussions we've had with practitioners, with academics, with victims groups, with perpetrators, you know, it's very patchy as to whether it's available or whether there's an awareness of it in particular areas. And what we're trying to do to remedy that is the aim is to have it nationwide as an option to victims of crime. So, you know, that's where we want to get to. It's going to take a bit of time to get there, obviously, but we've managed to increase its profiles to the extent that it went into the programme for government. So there is a specific action in the programme for government about, I'll read it out to get the wording exactly right, work with all criminal justice agencies to build capacity to deliver restorative justice safely and effectively. And the first step in that is really we want to educate people as to what restorative justice is, so that people can see the benefits of it in a whole range of situations. And we're working with Restorative Justice for Change, as you know, Tim, and with Maynooth University in particular, around highlighting examples of where restorative justice has been successful in a whole range of situations, obviously anonymised situations. But we think that will drive a better understanding of it and gain a better buy-in for it. We also have the Community Sanctions Bill, which colleagues of mine in the legislation part of the department are working on at present and trying to advance and get it onto the order paper in the Oireachtas as well. And that provides for restorative justice as well. I mean, it's going to be a gradual process, and I know that's going to frustrate many advocates and campaigners. But something like this, it is better to get it right, because restorative justice done badly can do so much harm. So we're very conscious of that. We're linking in with all relevant experts and victims groups and with groups who deal with offenders as well, to try and make sure all the different voices are heard. And when we're designing a system, we're designing it as effectively as possible. But that is the aim, is to get national rollout. And I think the Programme for Government Commitment demonstrates that there is a willingness and an impetus behind it now.
Yes. I think that's really good news. I mean, one of the problems, I think, for the sort of criminal justice system is its sort of almost exclusive focus on offenders. And I think it's a really difficult to envisage how we could develop a restorative justice program that was victim initiated, that that victims could initiate the process rather than wait for the offender to be caught and then somebody to ask the offender. And I would put that out as a challenge. I can see Marie wanting to come in. Could you just make it brief, because I want to bring Ivana.
I'll make it very brief. The attrition rate in sexual crime is very high. In other words, we could, without going into statistics, we could actually say that about 10% of offenders are prosecuted through the criminal justice system. That means that 90% of offenders are not in the criminal justice system, and 90% of the victims are not in the criminal justice system. So this needs an all across government departmental approach, Ben. It's not just a criminal justice issue, it's an issue for health as well, because 90% of victims get no justice through criminal justice whatsoever, and restorative justice needs to be attending to their health and well-being as well as justice needs. So it needs to be cross-governmental department, not just criminal justice.
That's the challenge. Ivana, have you any comments on this issue about accessibility, particularly for victims? But I'd also, before you finish, I'd welcome your comments on the performance that you've witnessed as well, because everybody has given their observations. So welcome back, and if you could address both those things.
Thanks very much, Tim. Thank you for that, and thanks to Gúna Nua Theatre Company and Jill McCaw for the invitation. I am sorry I had to bow out for half an hour because we had, unfortunately, just the timing of the Shannon business tonight meant I had to speak on a motion on sick pay. But I found the performance really powerful, and well done, Geoff. I just think it was superbly written. I actually read the script that I was sent as well. So that was really interesting to see. There was one line that Jan says during the excerpt that we saw earlier, which I thought really jumped out at me, where she says about, why would she be interested in RJ? She says, I want him to look me in the eye and see that I'm strong. I thought that was brilliant. It really brought home to me the power of it. It's a pleasure to be on a panel with Marie Keenan, I should say, also, well, with everyone, but particularly with Marie, because I brought her film The Meeting, the film by Alan Gilson, but with Alva Griffith as the main person that's playing herself as the victim. We brought that film into Leinster House, and Marie came and spoke, as did Alva and Alan, in 2018, just to try and bring home to legislators the real power and value of restorative justice. So, just listening, just to come to the point about accessibility, Tim, I mean, the others like Ben and Deirdre and Marie will have a greater knowledge than I on the ground as to accessibility. And it is welcome to see, as Ben has said, that there is a commitment to rolling out restorative justice measures in the programme for government. Unfortunately, patchy is exactly the word I would use, Ben, to describe delivery up to date. And it is unfortunate. I mean, it's now 11 years since we had the National Commission report in 2009 that set out really the blueprint for how you could roll out a national service. Back in 2007, in fact, on the Justice Committee, in the Oireachtas, we did a report on it. There's huge goodwill towards restorative justice from legislators and policymakers, because the evidence base for it is clear, the power it has, the fact that it brings the victim back into the process in such a tangible and substantial way. So I think that it is a matter of really pressing for it. Certainly I'll do it as much as I can as a legislator, and I hope we'll see real real substance behind that motivation, because really it has been patchy for too long. We've seen pilot projects that have had success, but we've never seen that absolute commitment at the Department of Justice level. I do take Marie's point about other departments too. In fact, Department of Children and Youth Affairs, I think, are taking some justice aspects, so specifically relating to young offenders. So I'm not sure whether there might be a role there for that department. Certainly my brief is spokesperson on children, and I'll try and press for that, because certainly with the Children Act provisions and family conferencing is one of the stronger ways in which we've seen the probation service rolling out restorative justice. So I suppose with those few words, just to thank you again, Tim, for bringing me in at this late point.
Thanks a lot, Ivana. Darren, what have we got?
Thanks, Tim. There's a couple of questions related to Damon. So I'll group them together. The first one is, why was the choice made that Damon was a poorer person with attachment and trauma history rather than a middle class boy with the same issues? And the second question is, Damon spoke a lot about his fear of stigma from his peers if he pursued RJ. He didn't want to appear soft, and it's a question that, is stigma a big barrier for perpetrators when they choose to pursue RJ, and if so, how is that to be overcome?
Okay, interesting questions. I think I'll start with you, Geoff, but I think maybe others will be interested in particularly that second aspect of the stigma and the shame, I think, which Deirdre has already mentioned. How do we enable perpetrators to break through the shame towards responsibility? Geoff, how come you chose somebody from a poor background who'd had a difficult family life, etc.?
Well, yeah, I can understand why somebody would ask that question. I suppose I first came to this story through that woman I met. I mentioned the aforementioned woman a few years back, and the process that she'd been through was the starting point from which, you know, I began writing this play. And for her, it was somebody. It was a troubled teen. She also was a teacher, and so I for no other reason than that, perhaps it just began from there, and not wishing to you know, in any way tar any group of people or section of society with the propensity for carrying out such an act, but it was just simply, it was that which I began with, and obviously it became its own story and a fictionalized account, but I held on to that, and I suppose I liked the fact that it was a one-on-one situation, that it was very personal. It was somebody the teacher Jan knew well, and therefore the implications of that, and when they finally meet again at the end of the play, that it will be difficult, moving, affecting, you know, powerful as well, but that it was somebody, because of that, I suppose she was a teacher in the character that's there, that she's a teacher who was very much invested in him, was very interested in trying to improve his lot. He was somebody, the character is somebody, Damon, that is, who shows talent in art, and she wanted to in some way progress that as much as possible. And so it just simply for those reasons, it wasn't for any other. It could have been from, you know, I could have begun the whole process with somebody from a different background, but that's how it started.
Thanks, Geoff. Deirdre, would you like to comment on, you know, we've talked quite a bit about the victim's point of view and the victim's shame, but what about the perpetrator's sense of shame and stigma, and is that a barrier to them participating actively in a restorative process?
I would think it is. I think stigma and shame is at the core of everything around this issue in terms of it being sexual violence. I'm sure that's very much to the fore of anybody's mind if they were approached about this issue. I think the beauty of restorative practices is that it tries to address that in the first instance. So you could see the facilitator in the reading trying to find common ground, trying to make a connection with Damo, just around, you know, things that, like the art aspect of his life, things that he was good at, his family, things that were important to him. That those human connections are really what restorative practices are based on, and it's about building those connections and trust. And I think that's where the stigma starts to get broken down, and that's where people in his situation can start to learn about the harm that they've caused, and the and are open then to hearing from Jan around her experience of that and answering the questions. So yeah, stigma absolutely is the first kind of hurdle to jump, but I think facilitators as a rule will know that and will understand that if they're skilled in that area, and that's the first. And again, I think for some people who are approached who cause harm, it's almost intrigue, like, why is this person, I think she mentions that Jan is the person, is the reason she's there. So you could see that there was some sort of interest, like, what's this about? This is a different approach. This isn't something that has been put to me before. So yeah, absolutely, stigma is a big issue, and it needs to be to the forefront of people's minds when they're thinking about this, especially if they're looking at this process. But hopefully facilitators are skilled enough to address that in the first instance.
Thanks. Marie?
Well, I did a study in 2014 with a fantastic team and with a collaborator called Facing Forward. And we interviewed a qualitative study, 149 participants, judges, barristers, probation officers, Gardaí, NGOs, the whole lot. But 30 victims of sexual crime and 23 offenders, 10 of whom were in custody and 13 of whom were in the community, all had been through the criminal justice system. And what was quite interesting there was when we asked them, would you be willing to participate in restorative justice? We did individual interviews and focus groups and whatever, and it's written up and it's on UCD website on my link to me. But what the offenders said is, yes, they would be willing to do restorative justice were they asked. They wouldn't go looking for it, but were they asked to do it with the victim, they would be willing to do this. Now, these were all convicted offenders. And when we asked them, why would you be willing to do it? It was very interesting, their responses. To repay a debt, to do something honourable, having done something so dishonourable, to tell honestly, to answer the victim's questions honestly for the first time. And all of these people who'd been through court proceedings and so on, obviously it told us in the course of the interviews that on legal advice during the course of criminal proceedings, they were advised to keep the story small, to only answer what they were asked. But they knew that if victims had lots of questions, that they would now feel able to answer the questions honestly. And then for some of them, it was about seeking forgiveness or offering apologies for family reintegration and so on. But it was interesting in that shame didn't come up in our study, that they wouldn't do it because they were ashamed. They wouldn't do it. They were afraid. Fear came up, fear of facing, like in Jan's case, facing that woman in the eye, looking her in the eye and knowing what harm one had done to her. But they did say, and this is important for policy and going forward, the offenders in my study said that they would be willing to do it were they to be asked.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ben or Ivana, do you have any comments on the issue around stigma and shame?
Yeah, I might come in there. I take Marie's point, and I'm aware of that as well. That there is a willingness there, and it's just to be able to construct an effective system around that, to be able to tap into that, and that's what we're hoping to develop. And I think it is useful. I mean, for individual offenders, a lot of them have put up this wall mentally themselves where they don't want to deal with what they've done, but they're carrying that guilt around with them. And when it's put to them, as Marie's team did when they did the research, that this is what the purpose of this is, they can see themselves that it is a chance to explain, or not to justify it, but at least to alleviate some of the guilt by explaining their situation, what they did, and everything else. That it is cathartic, I suppose, in a way, and it is important for them to understand the impact that they've had on the survivor, the victim, And that can help, really help in terms of recidivism and developing that empathy. So it's something that we really want to push on with, to try and ensure, to tap into that willingness that seems to be there. And just to touch on one other point that was mentioned in the play, where there was talk of the stigma in relation to how it's perceived by the other people who are in the prison. We often find people affiliate with certain groups and everything in prison because it's a survival instinct. It's for safety. But there is a very, very deep desire often to find a pathway out of that. And this can be a very effective pathway if used correctly. So again, that's something we're exploring.
Thanks, Ben. Ivana?
Well, I think it's very true that it's a way of, it's cathartic. It does appear to be cathartic. I mean, I recall as a barrister years ago representing a young client who was given a chance at restorative justice in one of the very early projects, and seeing that kid, early teens, actually realise the humanity of the victim who had been faceless. It was a car theft, and seeing the impact that the theft of a car had on an individual. It certainly was about developing an empathy that wasn't there before. So, I think Marie, of course, is right about, people, it needs to be offered, it needs to be asked. I was struck by in the performance how careful Vicky is in approaching the question with Damon and in building to the ask, and it's well done, because obviously it's also about how people are asked to take part. But if it's, and particularly, obviously the play is about a much more serious offence, but to see younger people, kids, being brought face to face with the impact of their actions, that shows the real impact that restorative justice can have and the real change it can make for people.
Marie, did you want to add something?
Yes, I was just going to say that before I went to work in UCD, I was coordinator of a treatment program for sex offenders. And so, I put hundreds and hundreds of sex offenders through that program. And what we found all the time was that, their desire to try to do something good to make amends, if you like, if they could. Of course they couldn't, but it was almost like in their interest to know that the victim was getting on better in their lives. And many of those offenders that I worked with were just only wishing they could make some kind of measure of be useful in some way to the victims. And restorative justice presents this opportunity. But just also to say that in another study that Estelle Zinstag and myself did, a global study, let's be really clear. Whilst we're, in the play, Vicky was saying she hadn't done a rape case before and it looks like it doesn't happen much. In our study, we had 74 global participants, global programs, from South Africa to Dublin. And what we have found is that 65% of the 74 programs were offering restorative justice for 10 years or more. It's happening under the radar, and it's happening under the radar because victims want it. And I think we need to keep our eye on, in sexual violence cases, it needs to be victim initiated, not offender initiated. But if a victim initiates, then we need to go to the offenders. And my evidence is that they'd be willing to do it, mostly. Yeah. They might change their mind a bit. They might come and go. They might say yes and then go home and change their mind, or their family might say, no, don't do that. And then that goes with the turf. We know this goes with the turf, but in the main, if you have a good facilitator and you stick with it, we go and talk to their families then. If the family is trying to persuade them not to do it, let's talk to the families. Not to try to persuade them because it's a voluntary process, but to give them good information. There is something in this for your son. He can sleep more easily at night if he has done something in his power to help the person he harms so badly.
Thanks, Marie. Deirdre.
Just a quick comment. I suppose it probably goes without saying, but in terms of people's willingness to engage, our experience has been that it's a very painful engagement once they get there. And if this is someone's to be offered this in prison, or even for the person who's been harmed, we have found that it's crucial that additional support is offered to that person. Because unpacking the story of either the harm that you cause or the harm that's been caused to you it's very different in restorative processes. So it's not like reading an indictment in court and hearing somebody plead not guilty. It's a very in-depth personal journey. So it is important that resources be given to offenders in prison or to victims who choose to engage really around their emotional well-being in the background. It will complement the process, but it's really important that it happens.
Thank you. If I could just add my tuppence worth, I came across a quote some time ago from the great jazz trumpeter Miles Davis, who says, when you hit a wrong note in jazz, it's the next note that counts. And I think that sort of sums up what we're talking about, that we have a culture when somebody does something terrible, quite rightly they're condemned and blamed. But I think what restorative justice says is not just what they did, but what did they do next? Did they try to face up to it? Did they try to make it right with the person they've harmed? Did they try to live a good life after that? That's how we should judge people. But we do have a sort of culture within our society, I think, which is about blaming and shaming. And people find it very difficult to get rid of that stigma once it's on them. Restorative justice, I think, provides an accountable way to move on. Darren, have we got time for another question? I think we're getting close to the end, but
yeah, there's just a couple of questions. We probably won't get to all the questions at this stage, Tim, but there's a couple of questions that might be worth touching on, which are kind of moving away maybe from, it kind of goes back to Ivana's case that she referenced. So one of them is, do the speakers think that the judiciary have a key role to play in identifying cases that come before them that have potential to be dealt with through restorative justice? And would some training or guidance help in that regard? And then the second question is, could the panel just go back to the question of when is it recommended for restorative justice to take place, particularly for more minor criminal cases that come before the courts?
Okay, we've got to be quick. We've only got 3 minutes. So Ivana, I'll ask you to respond to that one. Can judges be trained and encouraged to refer more for restorative justice?
Well, just very briefly, yes, I think it would be helpful to give judges a better grounding in restorative justice. I must say there is more by way of training for judges generally now, so things have improved. But generally, I mean, my experience, and others will know more, I think, is the probation service. The probation service will identify if somebody is suitable. The judge may ask the probation service to assess, but it's really a probation service matter because then they take on, of course. But with young offenders, I think there's a huge openness among the judges because that's a more established system under the 2001 Children Act. So we've seen a bit more, I think, more openness among judges to that there.
I think I'm going to have to draw this to a close. So I'd just like to thank all the panelists, thank the unseen audience for the excellent questions. I thought the questions were really on the money, straight to the heart of the issues that the play raised. Thank you, Geoff, for writing the play, and to the actors for such a good performance. And all I can say is I can't wait to see it live in a theatre with real people, and to see the whole play. It would be great if we can move towards that situation as soon as possible. So thank you very much, and good night.
Thanks.